I lost everything in the divorce. My $4.7 million home with the infinity pool and glass staircase, my Mercedes, the one I used to park at the front of my job sites like a business card on wheels, most of my savings, my investments, my reputation, and worst of all, I lost my son. As we walked out of the courtroom that final day, I was holding a cardboard box with my documents. She was holding victory like perfume. Tiffany leaned in, her heels clicking arrogantly on the polished tile, her lips brushing my ear as she whispered, "Enjoy poverty." Then she laughed. Actually laughed, like the destruction of my life was the punchline of a joke only she understood. At that moment, I believed her. I believed that my life as I knew it was over, that all the years I'd worked, all the things I'd built, all the late nights and early mornings, had all led to this. A man in a wrinkled suit, clutching papers, watching his ex-wife walk away with his house, his car, and his kid. I didn't know then that a dusty filing cabinet in a flooded basement was waiting for me. I didn't know that one forgotten folder, one yellowed deed from 1961, would change everything. Before we start, hit like, subscribe, and hype, and tell me where you're watching from. Now let me tell you how I went from cleaning out foreclosed houses to owning the ground under a tech empire. My name is Mark Reyes. I'm 42, and before my life imploded, I built luxury. Penthouse condos with glass walls and rooftop pools, suburban mansions with imported marble and custom wine cellars, those sleek office towers you see in skyline photos. I'd been the guy walking through them with blueprints in hand, pointing, directing, making sure the dreams on paper turned into steel and stone. I was a construction executive, not the guy swinging the hammer, but the one who could look at a hole in the ground and see a finished building in his head. I knew how to talk to architects in their language and subcontractors in theirs. I knew how to cool down an angry investor and fire a lazy project manager in the same afternoon. I liked what I did. I liked watching something rise from nothing. I liked knowing I'd been part of making it stand there. My office had a wall of windows overlooking downtown Austin. There was a bar cart I barely used, leather chairs clients sank into, and a framed photo on my desk of my son Caleb on my shoulders at a job site, both of us grinning under hard hats. My marriage, from the outside, fit the same aesthetic. Tiffany was beautiful in the way Instagram loves. Long dark hair, perfect makeup, gym-toned body. Her dresses were tight, her shoes were tall, her standards were taller. She had been a hostess at a high-end restaurant when we met, and I'd been stupid enough to confuse charm with character. She liked nice things. I liked providing them. It felt at first like a fair trade. We got married in a private vineyard. She walked down an aisle between grapevines in a designer dress that cost more than my first car. My mother cried. Her father gave a speech about marrying into success. I remember standing there, ring in my hand, thinking, this is it. I did it. I built something solid. A life. A family. Then Caleb was born, and for the first time, I felt something that wasn't tied to a paycheck or a finished project. Holding him in that hospital room, his tiny fingers clenching around mine, I promised him everything without saying a word. I promised him I'd always make sure he was safe. I promised him I'd always show up. I promised him my love wouldn't depend on anything he did or didn't do. I wish I could say Tiffany changed when he arrived. She didn't. If anything, she doubled down. The house got bigger, the cars got nicer, the handbags multiplied like rabbits. Our entire life became a curated image. Family photos had to be done with a professional photographer. Everyday outfits for a 2-year-old were designer-coordinated sets. She used phrases like branding our family without irony. At first, the business could keep up. I worked brutal hours, 12, 14, sometimes 16-hour days if a project hit a crisis. I ignored the tightness in my chest, the pounding behind my eyes, the way the coffee didn't help like it used to. It's worth it, I'd tell myself, staring at spreadsheets at midnight. This is for Caleb. This is for our future. But the cracks started small, like they always do. A recession hit. 2 big projects got delayed. 1 investor pulled out. Another demanded impossible timelines and punished me when I said no. Cash flow went from strong to complicated to, oh God. I told Tiffany bits and pieces at first. We need to be careful with spending for a while, I said one night, loosening my tie as I walked into the kitchen. We're fine, but some clients are late paying, and I don't want to take on more debt than we have to. She didn't look up from her phone. Does careful mean I should return the dress I just bought? She asked. I stared at the shopping bags on the counter. 3 of them, each with a logo that gave me heartburn. It means maybe we shouldn't be buying 3 dresses at once, I said carefully. At least not right now. She finally looked at me then, eyes narrowing. I didn't marry you to worry about money, she said. If I wanted that life, I would have stayed with my ex in his one bedroom. It was a punch disguised as a statement. I'm not saying we're broke, I said. I'm saying I'm trying to keep it that way. She rolled her eyes. Then work harder, Mark, she snapped. Isn't that what men like you always say? Just work harder? She walked away before I could answer. The argument echoed in my head at 3 a.m. when I stared at the ceiling, calculating numbers in the dark. The stress got heavier, my temper got shorter. I started snapping at small things. A spilled drink, a missed call, a subcontractor's mistake. The pressure cooked everything. Tiffany didn't like the version of me that wasn't casually powerful. She didn't like the man who came home exhausted, with cement dust still on his boots, asking for a quiet night instead of a dinner out. We drifted apart in the way people do when they share a house, but not a heart. The explosion, when it came, was almost boring. No big betrayal, no affair, just 1,000 tiny resentments that finally linked hands and walked in together. We were in the kitchen, arguing about money again, a bill, a trip, something I can't even remember. You always act like we're on the brink of disaster, she said, voice sharp. You're paranoid. It's like you want us to live like poor people. I want us to live like we're not one bad month away from losing everything, I said, maybe louder than I meant to. I'm trying to protect us, Tiffany. That's literally all I do. She crossed her arms. You're not protecting us, she said. You're suffocating me. I didn't sign up for this constant fear. Then she said the words that stuck in my brain like a nail. You're emotionally unstable, Mark. You're turning into your father. She knew exactly where to hit. I froze. My father had untreated depression, I said quietly. He still showed up. He still worked. He yelled, she cut in. He scared you. You told me that, and now you slam doors and raise your voice and stomp around like a bear. Do you think that's fun for Caleb? She walked away, leaving me standing there with my heart in my hands and my anger bouncing off the walls. A month later, she filed for divorce. She didn't just want out. She wanted out with everything. Her lawyer was a shark in a tailored suit. In court, they painted me as unstable. They brought up my long hours, my late nights, my stress. They twisted my worries into paranoia, my caution into financial recklessness. He works 12 to 16-hour days, Tiffany said on the stand, eyes shining with carefully timed tears. He comes home angry, exhausted, snapping at everyone. I'm scared for our son. There have been nights where I wondered if it was safe for Caleb to be around him when he's like that. There were no reports of violence, no arrests, no hospital visits, but the word unstable hung in the air like smoke. Her lawyer showed bank statements and cherry-picked numbers, making it look like I'd gambled our future instead of trying to keep us afloat. Mr. Reyes has multiple lines of credit, he said, gesturing at the screen. His business is leveraged almost to the breaking point. He has taken on huge financial risk. My client should not be shackled to that. My lawyer tried to push back, but it felt like showing up to a gunfight with a stapler. When it came to custody, they doubled down. She's the stable parent, Tiffany's lawyer said smoothly. He's gone most of the time. He's volatile. Caleb needs consistency. I wanted to shout, I'm working those hours for him. But in court, emotion works against you. The judge looked at me over her glasses, eyes tired from too many lives imploding in front of her. In light of the financial instability and emotional volatility presented, she said, I am granting primary custody to the mother, with visitation rights to the father. Assets are to be divided as follows. The rest blurred. I heard numbers, percentages, valuations. I heard my lawyer whisper, we expected this, like it was supposed to comfort me. But all I really heard, echoing in the space where my heart had been, was, you lose. The house, hers. The car, hers. 70% of my assets, hers. Caleb, mostly, hers. When we walked out of the courtroom, I felt like I'd been scraped out and left hollow. Tiffany's heels clicked on the polished floor as she walked beside me. There was a lightness in her shoulders I hadn't seen in years. She stopped just long enough to turn toward me, that sickly sweet smile stretching across her face. Enjoy poverty, she murmured. Then she laughed, real laughter, from her chest. She tossed her hair over her shoulder and walked away with her lawyer, already talking about next steps. I watched them go, my hand tightening around the edges of my cardboard box until the corners dug into my skin. It took everything in me not to shout after her, not to crumble, not to run. Instead, I walked outside into a world that looked exactly the same and felt completely different. You don't realize how much your identity is wrapped around what you own until all of it is gone. In the span of a few weeks, I went from a $4.7 million hilltop house with glass railings and a driveway that could fit 8 cars to a one-bedroom apartment above a nail salon that smelled like acetone and fried food. My Mercedes, gone. I bought a 15-year-old pickup from a guy on Craigslist for $3,200 cash. It had a cracked dashboard, a radio that only worked if you hit it twice, and a permanent stale coffee smell. My office? Gone. The company I'd built had been sliced up, sold off, merged. What was left of my position disappeared with the assets. I woke up one morning and realized I didn't have a title, a parking spot, or health insurance. All I had was a stack of bills, a court order, and a schedule that dictated when I was allowed to see my son. Wednesdays from 5 to 8, every other weekend. Going from seeing your kid every day to seeing him on a timer is like losing oxygen. You still breathe, technically, but never quite enough. The first Wednesday, I picked Caleb up from Tiffany's new place. He ran out to hug me, backpack bouncing, hair a little longer than I remembered. "Dad!" he yelled, barreling into me. "Did you bring the Lego set?" I'd spent the last of my grocery money on that Lego set. "Of course I did, buddy," I said, forcing a smile. "We're going to build the biggest spaceship that ever existed." Behind him, Tiffany stood in the doorway of her new townhouse, paid for with the assets she'd walked away with. She wore yoga pants and an expensive top, her hair done, nails perfect. She looked me up and down, taking in the old truck parked at the curb, the lines on my face, the cheap watch on my wrist. "Well," she said, "at least you still have your charm." I ignored her. For 3 hours, Caleb and I sat on the floor of my tiny living room, plastic pieces spread around us, building something from nothing. He didn't ask about the old house, not directly. He looked around once and said, "This place is cozy." 9-year-olds shouldn't know how to comfort their parents. After I dropped him back off that night, the silence in my apartment felt like it had weight. I sat at the small kitchen table, head in my hands, the numbers swirling. Rent, utilities, gas, lawyer fees still hanging over me like a storm cloud, child support payments that were, frankly, generous to her and brutal to me. I needed income, fast. I sent out resumes like confetti, construction executive, project manager, consultant. My experience was solid, but the market was flooded. Companies were restructuring. Developers were pausing new acquisitions. A few interviews came and went. "We'll be in touch," they said. They weren't. One morning, desperation pushed me into a job listing I would have scrolled past a year earlier without a second thought. Property preservation, foreclosure. Clean-out crew needed. Must have truck. Be physically capable. Duties. Clean out foreclosed properties, remove debris, minor repairs. Pay, by job. Immediate start. It was a far fall from handling multi-million-dollar builds. But my pride didn't pay bills. My degree didn't buy groceries. My past title didn't influence the landlord. I called the number. A gruff voice answered. "Yeah?" "I'm calling about the clean-out position," I said. "You got a truck?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "You scared of mold, rats, or dead things?" he asked. Less than I'm scared of my bank balance," I said before I could stop myself. He laughed once. "You're hired," he said. "Can you start Monday?" So that's how I went from overseeing luxury construction to hauling trash out of foreclosed homes for a bank's contractor. The first property nearly broke me. It was a 1-story house in a neighborhood that had seen better days. Overgrown yard, peeling paint, a faded "for sale" sign with the "sale" part crossed out. The front door had been kicked in weeks ago. Squatters had come and gone. The smell hit me first. Mildew, rot, something sour and chemical, all mixed together. I stepped carefully through the doorway, boots crunching on broken glass. Inside, the walls were stained with graffiti, and old family photos still hung crookedly in places, untouched. A child's drawing of a stick figure house with a smiling sun was taped to the fridge. The fridge itself buzzed quietly, empty except for a single jar of something unidentifiable. I walked room to room, making mental notes. Trash bags here, furniture there, carpets gone. Mold on the bathroom ceiling, a mattress on the floor in one bedroom with a burned hole in the center, a Bible on the nightstand. My job was simple. Clear it out. Make it ready for investors to come in, slap on some paint, and flip it. It felt like erasing the last traces of someone's life. Still, I did it. I filled bag after bag with broken toys, stained clothes, old magazines. I hauled them out to a dumpster, my muscles burning in a way the gym never managed to hit. By the end of the day, my back ached, my hands were raw even through gloves, and my clothes smelled like mold and dust. But when I got back to my apartment and opened the envelope with my first payment, a modest amount, but real money, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Relief? It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't what my resume said I should be doing, but it was honest work. And right now, honest work was all I had. Days blurred into each other. Houses in various states of decay, 3-bedroom ranches with overgrown yards, townhouses with eviction notices still duct-taped to the door. Once, a mini-mansion, its stone facade already stained by weather, its grand staircase covered in dust. Every place had a story, and every story had ended the same way, with a bank taking back the keys. I scrubbed moldy walls, my scrub brush squeaking over peeling paint. I ripped up carpets that squelched with unseen moisture. I dragged sofas to curbs, emptied refrigerators full of rotting food, cleared out basements full of boxes no one had bothered to take. Sometimes I'd find a family photo left behind, a graduation picture, a wedding portrait, a baby's first Christmas. I never threw those away. I had a cardboard box in my apartment where I kept them, a small cemetery of strangers' memories. "Why do you keep those?" Caleb asked once during a visit, sifting through the box carefully. "Because someone cared enough to frame them," I said. "Feels wrong to toss them like trash." He nodded, solemn in that way kids sometimes get when they understand more than you think. I didn't complain about the work. I didn't complain when my knees popped going upstairs or when bleach burned my nose. Every check meant I could keep my lights on. Every job meant I could keep my visitation schedule. Every dollar meant I could buy Lego sets and pizza and movie tickets for the nights Caleb was with me. Then came the house with the basement. It was a rainy Tuesday, the kind where the sky sits low and gray, pressing on you. The property was older than most of the ones I'd seen in the last months, a squat brick house on the edge of town, built sometime in the 60s, if I had to guess. The yard was a jungle, grass up to my knees, weeds winning the war. A bright orange notice was nailed to the door, condemned, scheduled for demolition. "Place is a mess," my supervisor had said over the phone. "Bank wants it cleared before they bring in the excavators. There's a basement. Watch your step." Basements in Texas are rare. When they show up, they're usually bad news. I stepped inside, flashlight in hand. Rain pattered steadily against the boarded-up windows. The living room was empty except for a sagging couch and a coffee table with one leg missing. Wallpaper peeled from the walls in long strips. The kitchen was a horror show of rusted appliances and cabinets hanging off hinges. I found the basement door in the hallway, half hidden behind a leaning bookcase. It groaned when I pulled it open. A wave of damp, earthy air rolled up, thick and heavy. I clicked on my flashlight and pointed it down. The stairs were wooden, slick with moisture, some boards warped. I tested each step carefully before putting my weight on it. "Please don't break," I muttered. "Not today." At the bottom, water pooled in places, reflecting the beam of my light. The concrete walls were stained, streaked with years of leaks. A rusted water heater lurked in one corner like a cornered animal. And against the far wall, half sunk into the floor, was a heavy metal filing cabinet. It was tall, 4 drawers, dented on one side. The beige paint had rusted along the edges, blooming in ugly orange patches. The top drawer had a padlock on it, corroded to the point of almost being part of the metal. I almost ignored it. Old paperwork wasn't my problem. My job was to clear furniture, trash, anything obvious. Boxes of dead people's taxes usually went straight to the shredder. But something about the cabinet tugged at me. Maybe it was because it looked out of place, solid, purposeful. The rest of the basement looked like it had given up. The cabinet still stood. I sloshed through shallow water until I reached it. I tugged on the top drawer. The lock held. For a second, I considered just leaving it. Telling my supervisor, basement had a cabinet, couldn't open it. But another thought flickered in. What if there's something valuable in there? Something like cash, or jewelry, or... Not for me. If there was anything important, it needed to go back to the bank, or the previous owner, if they ever came looking. But we were supposed to empty everything. I went back up to the truck, grabbed my crowbar, and returned. The metal was reluctant. It screamed in protest when I jammed the bar against the latch and leaned my weight into it. "Come on," I grunted, muscles straining. Water dripped steadily from somewhere above, tapping on my shoulders, my neck. With a final, ugly snap, the lock gave. The drawer slid open a few inches, releasing a puff of air that smelled like paper and time. I pulled it open the rest of the way. Inside, hanging in neat rows, were files. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Their tabs labeled in faded ink. Names, dates, parcel numbers. I pulled one out at random. Garcia, L. Taxes, 1979, 1985. I flipped it open. Old tax returns, handwritten notes, receipts from a different era. I opened a few more. Wills, mortgage documents, title transfers. It looked like whoever had lived here had worked in some kind of records office, or had been the type of person who kept everything. My flashlight beam slid over the manila folders, moving down the drawer. Then my eyes caught on one label that made my stomach drop. Reyes, A. Reyes, M. Reyes. My last name. I froze, breath stuck in my throat. I told myself it was a coincidence. Reyes isn't rare. There are thousands of us. Tens of thousands. My hand still shook when I reached for the folder. The tab was worn soft from use. The edges were frayed. Someone had handled this one a lot. I slid it out carefully, heart thudding in my ears. There, in messy but familiar handwriting across the front, were two names. Alejandro Reyes, my grandfather, and beneath it, written in a different pen, in cleaner print, Mark Reyes, my name. I stood there, in ankle-deep water, in a rotting basement scheduled for demolition, holding a folder with my grandfather's and my own name on it. For a moment, the world narrowed to the size of that manila rectangle. My fingers felt clumsy as I opened the folder. Inside, neatly stacked despite the damp air trying to curl the edges, were documents that looked older than anything else in the cabinet. On top, a letter. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded in places, but the handwriting was clear, my grandfather's looping script. I'd only met him a few times before he died when I was a teenager. I remembered his rough hands, his quiet way of speaking, his eyes that always seemed to be looking past us at something only he could see. I'd seen his handwriting in old Christmas cards. This was the same. I angled the flashlight and began to read. January 4th, 1961. Austin, Texas. To whom it may concern, this letter is to confirm my purchase of the land described in the attached deed, 127 acres outside the city limits of Austin, Texas. I have paid in full and intend this land to remain in the Reyes family as long as the Lord allows. One day, if my sons or their sons need it, I pray this land will be a blessing to them. Sincerely, Alejandro Reyes. Attached to the letter, held by a rusted paperclip, were copies of tax receipts, yearly, neatly filed, from 1961 through 1975. Property tax payments, all in my grandfather's name. Beneath those, folded carefully, lay the original deed. Thick paper, stamped, signed, official. 127 acres purchased January 3rd, 1961, Travis County, Texas. Owner, Alejandro Reyes. No recorded sale, no transfer noted on the document itself. I felt like someone had just dropped a live wire in my hands. My grandfather had owned land. A lot of land. I never knew. My father never mentioned it. Not once. Growing up, the story was always, we came from nothing. My father worked fields he didn't own. We lived rented to rented. You're the first one in this family really making something of himself, Mark. But here it was. Proof that somewhere along the line, we had something. Not just a house. Land. Come on, I told myself. Slow down. Don't jump ahead. On a small notepad page in the folder, in a different, shakier handwriting, my father's, someone had written, asked Dad about selling the land. He said, never. Said it's for the future. Don't know what that means. There were no more notes after that. No record of a sale, no transfer documents, no mortgage, just a deed and silent years. And below all that, near the bottom of the folder, was a more recent document, a sheet of notebook paper torn from a spiral pad, dated in the top corner, June 12th, 2002. The year my grandfather died, in my father's handwriting again. If anything happens to me, this land goes to Mark. He's the only one who seems to understand value. Put this with the other papers. Underneath, in different ink, someone had written my full name and birth date and an address. Not for the land, for the house I'd grown up in. I swallowed hard. Why had I never seen this? Why hadn't my father told me? Where had this folder been all these years? The obvious answer stood right in front of me, rusting quietly. This cabinet. Had my father worked here? Had he stored the documents here for safekeeping? Had someone else, a cousin, an uncle, been the unofficial keeper of family paperwork? Questions pressed in from all sides. My flashlight started to flicker, the battery protesting the extended use. Not now, I muttered, hitting it lightly. The beam steadied for the moment. My brain was starting to race ahead anyway, right past the questions into the dangerous territory of what if. What if the land still existed? What if no one had claimed it? What if this was some bureaucratic oversight that could be fixed with a few signatures? What if it was worth anything? I needed facts. The deed listed a legal description, a string of words and numbers that meant nothing to most people, but I'd dealt with enough property to know how to read it. It also listed an old rural route address. It sounded familiar, like something I'd seen on a map once. My hands were numb from the cold and the weight of the discovery, but I managed to slide my phone out of my pocket. Standing there, in water that seeped into my boots, I opened my browser and typed the address into Google Maps. The little spinning circle felt like it took forever. Finally, the map loaded. The blue dot of my current location pulsed where I stood. The search result popped up several miles away, just outside Austin proper. I switched to satellite view. The image zoomed in, pixels adjusting, sharpening, resolving into color. My breath caught. It wasn't empty land. It wasn't untouched fields or overgrown brush. It was a campus. Sleek glass buildings arranged around manicured courtyards, parking garages, soccer fields. A giant logo on one roof I recognized instantly, a global tech company whose name was on half the gadgets in America. I zoomed out, then in again, as if the picture might change if I looked from a different angle, but it stayed the same. Where my grandfather's 127 acres once sat, there was now a sprawling tech headquarters worth hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe more if you factored in the location, the buildings, the brand. I scrolled down to see the usual business info, tapping land records almost automatically. The county appraisal district had the property listed under a company name, sure, but when I dug deeper, clicking through public records like a man possessed, something became very clear very fast. The deed they had on file didn't match mine. Their chain of title started in the 80s with a sale from some limited partnership to another entity. Before that, the records were messy. There was a note. Original deed unavailable. Chain reconstructed from tax records and affidavits. My grandfather's name wasn't anywhere. It was like he and his land had never existed in their paperwork. But I was holding the original deed, with stamps, signatures, dates, with that quiet letter where he'd written, "I intend this land to remain in the Reyes family." My heart was thudding so hard I could hear it over the drip of water. If my grandfather had never legally sold the land, if the deed had never been properly transferred, if the original deed had gone missing and someone had just guessed, then on paper, on real legal paper, the land still belonged to the Reyes family. And according to that note my father had scribbled before he died, it belonged to me. I sank down onto an old milk crate, water splashing around my boots, the phone shaking in my hand. My whole life, I'd believed I came from nothing, that I'd pulled myself up by my own calloused hands from a line of men who'd never had a chance to own anything. Now, in a flooded basement, surrounded by mold and rot, the truth stared back at me. We'd owned something huge, and somewhere along the way, the world had forgotten, or been encouraged to forget. But the cabinet hadn't, the paper hadn't, and I hadn't, not anymore. I didn't sleep that night. My body was exhausted from work, but my brain was sprinting. I spread the documents from the folder out on my small kitchen table, weighting the corners with coffee mugs so they wouldn't curl. The deed, the tax receipts, the letter from my grandfather, my father's note about leaving the land to me. I used my phone to take high-resolution photos of everything, then backed those up to my email, a cloud drive, and a thumb drive I'd kept from my old office days. If there was one thing I'd learned in construction, it was this. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. By 2 a.m, my eyes were burning, but the path forward was forming, shaky but real. I needed a lawyer. Not the discount one I'd barely been able to afford for my divorce. Someone who lived and breathed property law, land disputes, title searches. Someone who wouldn't laugh me out of their office when I said, "I think a billion-dollar tech company might be sitting on my land." I started searching. Austin property dispute lawyer, Texas land deed expert, real estate litigation, old title research. One name kept popping up, attached to big cases, long articles, and phrases like precedent-setting victory. Renee Dalton, Eskern. Her firm's website was clean, modern, annoyingly confident. I almost closed the tab. People like that didn't take meetings with guys like me, guys who drove 15-year-old trucks and cleaned out foreclosed homes. But then I thought of Caleb, of Tiffany's voice in my ear. Enjoy poverty, of my grandfather's looped handwriting. I intend this land to remain in the Reyes family. I filled out the contact form. Name, Mark Reyes. Topic, possible land ownership. Title dispute, found original deed. Details, short description. I attached the photos. At the bottom, there was a box that said, urgency of matter. I hovered, then clicked, hi. I didn't expect an answer quickly. So when my phone rang at 9 the next morning with a number I didn't recognize, I almost didn't pick up. "This is Mark," I said, tossing a trash bag into the back of the truck with my free hand. "Mr. Reyes," a calm voice said, This is Attorney Renee Dalton. I received your message and your documents. My heart stuttered. Ms. Dalton? Hi, I said, straightening up. Thank you for calling. I know you're probably busy. I'm always busy, she cut in, not unkindly. But I make time for cases that look interesting, and yours does. Interesting good, or interesting you're insane? I asked before I could stop myself. There was a small pause. I heard keyboard keys in the background. Interesting as in, she said. If what you sent me is authentic, someone made a very expensive mistake 30 or 40 years ago. Where are you right now? I looked around at the half-empty garage of the house I was cleaning. Working, I said, on a property. But I can meet whenever. I'll make it work. Can you be at my office at 2? She asked. Bring the originals. Do not leave them in your truck. Do not let them out of your sight. Yeah, I said. Yes. I'll be there. I hung up, fingers tingling. For the next few hours, I moved like a man underwater, finishing the bare minimum at the property, my mind already in that office. At 1 o'clock, I went home, showered off the grime, shaved, dug out the one good shirt I'd kept from my old life. It was a little looser now, but it still fit. I slid the folder into a weatherproof plastic sleeve, then into my old leather briefcase, the one that had sat untouched since the divorce. Walking into Renee's office felt like stepping back into the world I used to move through. Glass doors, polished floors, receptionists with practiced smiles. Except this time, I wasn't the confident executive. I was the guy in the slightly wrinkled shirt clutching a briefcase like a life raft. Mr. Reyes? The receptionist asked. She's expecting you. Down the hall, last door on the right. Renee was not what I'd pictured. No stuffy older man in a suit. She was maybe mid-40s, hair pulled back, glasses perched on the end of her nose, a sleek navy blazer over a white blouse. Her office was lined with law books and framed newspaper clippings. She stood as I entered, extending a hand. Mark, she said. May I call you Mark? Sure, I said. You can call me anything if you tell me I'm not crazy. She gave a small, amused smile and gestured to the chair across from her desk. Let's start with the documents, she said. I placed the folder on her desk like it was made of glass and opened it slowly. She put on white cotton gloves, the kind archivists use, and examined each paper with a focus that made the room feel smaller. She checked stamps, signatures, the texture of the paper. She compared the deed to a template on her screen. She checked the dates on the tax receipts. Every few seconds she hummed quietly. Finally she looked up. These appear to be genuine, she said. Hand-signed, properly notarized. The county stamp from 1961 matches others I've seen. The tax receipts line up with what I'm seeing in the county's payment records. So it's real, I said, throat dry. It's real, she confirmed. And that's a problem for them. She turned her screen so I could see. This is the property as it exists now, she said. The satellite image I'd seen in the basement, only sharper. The county lists the current owner as a corporate entity, basically a shell for the tech company. Their chain of title starts in 1983. Before that, they claim the original deed was lost in a flood. They reconstructed ownership from tax records and sworn statements from someone named Hargrove. Not Reyes, I said. Not Reyes, she agreed. And here's the interesting part. Tax payments in your grandfather's name stop in 1975. Then there's a gap. Then payments show up again under this other name, which suggests one of two things. She held up 2 fingers. 1. Your grandfather sold the land privately, informally, and someone just never filed the paperwork properly. That would make the sale legally suspect, but not necessarily invalid. However, she tapped the deed. I see no record of any transfer from Reyes to anyone. No deed, no contract, nothing. And 2? I asked. 2. Someone just started paying taxes on land they didn't own, and the county, seeing money coming in, didn't ask many questions. Can they do that? I asked incredulously. They shouldn't, she said. But small counties in the 60s and 70s, they loved whoever paid. Records were spotty. Things got lost, people moved away, and when big money came sniffing around in the 80s and 90s, everyone just assumed the trail they had was good enough. But they never checked the original deed, I said. They never found it, she corrected. Or they didn't look hard enough. Either way, the original deed, this deed, never got canceled or superseded in the official record. On paper, your grandfather still owns that land. And per this note, she tapped my father's handwriting, he intended to pass it to you. So what does that mean? I asked, voice barely steady. Do I Own a tech campus? She actually laughed at that, short but genuine. It means, she said, that you have a very strong claim that the land beneath that campus was never properly conveyed, which means every building on it, every improvement, sits on a shaky foundation. The company has a nightmare if this goes public. My head spun. Can they just kick me out? I asked. Sue me? I mean, I'm just me. I clean houses. I don't have money for a giant legal battle. That's why you involve me, she said calmly. If we take this on, we'll do it on contingency. You don't pay unless we win. And if we win, there will be more than enough to pay my fee. How much is it worth? I asked, almost afraid of the answer. She leaned back, steepling her fingers. The land alone, at current commercial rates, could be north of $600 million, she said. Maybe more. The buildings, the brand presence, that's theirs. But they can't operate a multi-billion-dollar campus if they don't have clear title to the dirt under it. I gripped the armrests of my chair. So what happens? I asked. Do we evict them? That sounds insane. We don't start with that, she said. We start by filing a quiet title action. We record your deed, your claim, and ask the court to determine who the rightful owner is. We also file a lease pendens, a notice that there's a dispute. That alone will give their legal team heartburn. And then? I asked. And then, she said, a small smile curving her lips. They call. They threaten. They bluster. They send their own lawyers to try to tear your story apart. We do our homework. We fortify your claim. And when they realize you're not bluffing, they'll do what large corporations always do when faced with a costly problem. Try to crush it, I guessed. Eventually, she said, but before that, they'll try to make it go away with money. I swallowed. How much money are we talking? I asked. 9 figures, she said simply. Maybe more. Enough to change your life. Enough to change your son's life. Enough to make your ex-wife regret every word she said to you in that courtroom. I exhaled shakily. Do you want to proceed? She asked. I thought of Caleb, of his small hand in mine, of my cramped apartment and the rattling AC unit, of Tiffany's mocking, perfectly glossed mouth whispering, "Enjoy poverty." Yes, I said. Let's proceed. The next months moved in 2 speeds at once. On the surface, my life looked the same. I still woke up early, pulled on work boots, and drove my old truck to foreclosed houses. I still scrubbed graffiti off walls, cleared out garages full of junk, emptied cabinets of expired canned goods. I still counted dollars, made careful grocery lists, and checked my bank account more often than was healthy. I still picked up Caleb on Wednesdays, and every other weekend still built Lego spaceships and watched movies on my beat-up couch. But underneath, everything had shifted. I had a secret. A folder that never left my possession except when Renee borrowed it to make certified copies, and even then, I watched the process like a hawk. We met often. In her office. On calls. Over email. She assembled a small army of specialists. Title researchers, historians who knew how land was acquired in Travis County in the 60s, a forensic document examiner to certify that the deed and letters were what they appeared to be. They pulled every record they could from dusty archives and digital databases. They built timelines, charted payment histories, interviewed retired county employees who remembered that Reyes guy who always paid on time. Every time they found a gap in the other side's chain of title, Renee's eyes lit up. This is sloppier than I thought, she said one afternoon, tapping a highlighted section on a scanned document. They relied on a lost deed affidavit from a man who never actually produced any proof he bought the land. Just, I swear I did. The county let it slide because there was tax money coming in and nobody complained. Nobody knew, I said. We didn't know. Exactly, she said. You can't complain about losing something you don't know you have. But the law cares about what's on record. And what's on record is, your grandfather bought the land, never sold it, and the deed never changed hands. That's a very big problem for them. When she filed the quiet title action and the lis pendens, the reaction was almost immediate. The tech company's lawyers sent a thick packet to her office, demanding we withdraw the claim, calling it frivolous and predatory. Renee sent them a copy of the deed, properly authenticated, and a polite letter suggesting they reconsider their adjectives. 2 weeks later, they requested a meeting. It took place in a boardroom on the 20th floor of a building I'd once helped construct. I walked in wearing my best suit, the one I'd bought years ago for client presentations and then worn to my divorce. The company sent a team, 3 lawyers in expensive suits, and 1 executive with a haircut that probably cost more than my old truck. They barely looked at me. They talked to Renee like I was a case file instead of a person. We're prepared to contest your client's claim vigorously, their lead attorney said, flipping through his binder. We have decades of tax payments and improvements on that land. This deed could have been fabricated." "It wasn't," Renee said coolly. "And your own records acknowledge the original deed was missing when you acquired the property. You proceeded anyway. That was risky." "Even if this deed is authentic," another lawyer said, "statutes of limitation apply. Laches, estoppel." "Laches and estoppel require knowledge," Renee cut in. "My client and his father were never notified of any attempted transfer. They never received an offer, never signed a thing. The first time my client became aware of this land was when he found the deed in an abandoned basement. Your due diligence was incomplete. Now you're exposed." The executive finally spoke, voice smooth. "What is it you want, Mr. Reyes?" he asked, turning his gaze on me for the first time. "Really?" I held his eyes. "I want what my grandfather paid for," I said. "I want what my father intended to leave me. I want my son to know that our family didn't just disappear into nothing, that we had something, that our name means something." He smiled in that way people do when they're trying to look sympathetic and only succeeding in looking condescending. "We can't just hand you the campus," he said. "I didn't ask you to," I replied. "I asked you to fix your mistake." Renee slid a folder across the table. "In light of the strength of our claim," she said, "here's our starting point for settlement discussions." They opened it. I watched their eyes flick over the numbers. For a moment, the executive's mask slipped. "That's substantial," he said. "So is building a global headquarters on land you don't own," Renee replied calmly. They threatened, predictably. "This will drag on for years, Mr. Reyes," one lawyer warned. "Do you really want that? Do you have the resources for that fight?" I thought of my hands scrubbing mildew, of my son sleeping on my couch, of my ex-wife laughing in a courthouse hallway. "I didn't start this," I said. "You did, when you decided close enough was good enough for a chain of title. I'll last as long as I need to." They left without an agreement that day, but the calls kept coming, first angry, then urgent, then nervous. Because the lis pendens was public. Investors noticed. Shareholders asked questions. Articles with headlines like "Tech Giant Faces Land Ownership Dispute in Austin" started popping up in financial blogs. Their stock wobbled. They needed this to go away. Fast. The settlement, when it finally came together, didn't happen in a dramatic courtroom scene. It happened in a conference room with stale coffee and too cold air conditioning, after weeks of back and forths, revised drafts, and late-night strategy calls with Renee. The final terms were more than I dared to hope for when I stood in that flooded basement. A 9-figure payout, enough zeros that my brain fuzzed when I saw the total. A small but meaningful equity stake in the company, a public acknowledgement that they'd built their empire on someone else's foundation. A formal statement, carefully worded, admitting that past documentation practices were incomplete and that a settlement has been reached with the rightful landholder. They insisted on confidentiality regarding the amount, of course. They wanted to protect their brand. I insisted on one exception. A trust for my son, Caleb, clearly named in the documents, protected from any future claims by anyone, including my ex-wife. They balked at first. Renee held firm. In the end, they signed. The day the wire hit my account, a number so large I checked it 5 times, then made Renee check it twice more, I sat on my couch in my tiny apartment and laughed. Not the bitter laugh I'd had when Tiffany told me to enjoy poverty. A different laugh. A disbelieving, shaking, half-sob kind of laugh that comes when a weight you'd forgotten you were carrying suddenly falls off. I paid off every debt I had, credit cards, legal fees, old business obligations that had followed me like ghosts. Then I bought a house. Not a mansion, not a glass box on a hill. A home. A 2-story place in a quiet neighborhood with big trees and a backyard. Hardwood floors that creaked in places. A front porch with enough space for 2 chairs and a small table. I bought it in cash. When the real estate agent handed me the keys, she said, "Congratulations, Mr. Reyes. How does it feel to be a homeowner again?" "Different this time," I said, turning the keys in my hand. "This time it feels real." I furnished it slowly, carefully. Not with showroom sets, but with things that felt like us. A big, soft couch that could handle Lego battles and movie marathons. A sturdy dining table that would hold stacks of homework and pizza boxes. Shelves for the box of lost family photos from the houses I'd cleaned. I'd decided I wanted those reminders, after all, of what it meant to lose a home. Then, once the dust had settled, I called a different kind of lawyer, one who specialized in family law and custody battles. My previous experience with court had left a sour, acidic taste in my mouth, but I wasn't that man anymore. The one who'd walked in with a crumbling business and stress lines on his face while Tiffany strutted in on heels made of my money. Now I had stability. I had a house with space for a 9-year-old boy to grow. I had savings, income from the settlement, and my new investments. I had time. I'd cut back on the foreclosure work, taking only occasional consulting gigs instead. Most importantly, I had a story to tell the judge that wasn't about failure. It was about perseverance, responsibility. The lengths a father would go to keep showing up. We filed for a modification of custody. Tiffany showed up to the new hearing in a designer dress, her hair perfect, her lawyer the same shark from before. She looked me up and down when we ran into each other in the hallway. "Heard you moved," she said, lips curling. "Upgraded from your little rat nest?" "A bit," I said calmly. Her eyes narrowed. "Where'd you get the money?" she demanded. "You better not be hiding income. That would be fraud." I almost laughed. "You'll find out soon enough," I said. "In there." In court, things were different this time. My lawyer put my new financials on the record, along with the trust established for Caleb. Tiffany's lawyer raised her eyebrows. "Mr. Reyes, can you explain the sudden change in your financial situation?" she asked. I glanced at my lawyer, who nodded. "I discovered," I said evenly, "that my grandfather had left land to my family that had been improperly used by a corporation. After a legal dispute, we reached a settlement. I chose to use that money to secure a home and future for my son." There was a murmur in the courtroom. The judge's eyes sharpened. "So you're no longer in financial distress?" she asked. "No, Your Honor," I said. "I'm in a stable position. I have no debt. I own my home outright. I have a significant amount saved and invested. I've structured everything so that even if I never earned another dollar, I could support my son responsibly." Tiffany's lawyer pivoted. "Money isn't everything," she said smoothly. "Stability is also emotional. My client has been Caleb's primary caregiver. She has provided—" My lawyer stood. "Your Honor," she said, "we would like to submit evidence that Ms. Hartman—" "Hartman," I corrected in my head, remembering she'd gone back to her maiden name after the divorce. "Has repeatedly interfered with Mr. Reyes's visitation," my lawyer continued. "We have texts, emails, and messages where she cancels his scheduled time for reasons that are questionable. We presented screenshots. We're busy that day, maybe next time." "Caleb is too tired. It's better if he stays here." "You didn't confirm 2 weeks in advance, so I made other plans." The judge's mouth tightened. We also presented statements from Caleb's school, times when Tiffany had forgotten to put me on contact forms, times when she told teachers I was not really in the picture. And then my lawyer did something that made my throat tight. "Your Honor," she said, "we would also like to read a brief statement from Caleb, written with the help of a court-appointed child advocate. He's not here to testify, but his feelings were documented." It was a short statement. It said he loved both his parents. It said he liked time with his mom, but sometimes she said mean things about his dad. It said he didn't want to choose, but also said, in shaky handwriting, that he wished he could see his dad way more. The judge read it silently, her expression softening. She turned to Tiffany. "Ms. Hartman," she said, "can you explain why you repeatedly obstructed Mr. Reyes's visitation?" Tiffany had rehearsed lines. I could see them lining up behind her eyes. "He's unstable," she said. "He's yelled. He scared me. I was just trying to protect our son." My lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Any police reports?" she asked. "Any CPS involvement? Any documented incidents?" "No," Tiffany said. "Any evidence at all that Mr. Reyes has harmed or threatened your son?" My lawyer pressed. "No," she repeated, quieter. The judge sighed. "Ms. Hartman," she said, "I remember your case. I was concerned at the time about financial instability and emotional strain. But circumstances change. Mr. Reyes has demonstrated not only financial stability, but also a consistent effort to be in his son's life despite obstacles. You, on the other hand, appear to have used your position as primary custodian to punish him." Tiffany's mouth opened, then closed. The judge looked at me. "Mr. Reyes," she said, "what are you asking for today?" I swallowed. "I'm not trying to take Caleb away from his mother," I said. "I just want to be his father without having to fight for every hour. I want joint custody, a schedule that reflects that I'm not some visitor in his life, but his parent." The judge nodded slowly. "I've seen enough," she said. Her ruling wasn't cinematic. No gavel slam, no dramatic music, but to me, it was everything. Joint legal and physical custody, a balanced schedule, clear consequences if either parent interfered with the other's time. Tiffany's lawyer tried to protest. "This is a big change, Your Honor." "The bigger change," the judge said firmly, "was the one that removed this father from his son's daily life. That was made on imperfect information, This rectifies that. When we walked out of the courtroom, my legs felt weak. I leaned against the hallway wall for a second, letting it sink in. Caleb. Hastily drawn charts on a calendar, holidays split but not stolen, weekends that were finally ours. Tiffany stormed over. "You think this makes you some kind of hero?" she hissed. "No," I said. "It makes me his dad." She scoffed. "You got lucky," she said. "If that stupid deed hadn't fallen from heaven, you'd still be in that crappy apartment, begging for extra hours." I smiled then. Not wide, not mocking, just steady. "No," I said quietly. "I got what my family left me. What your lawyer never thought to ask if I had. You saw my worth when I was funding your lifestyle. Then you decided I was worthless when the money got tight. You're wrong on both counts." She glared, but there was a crack in it now, a flicker of something like fear or realization. I didn't stick around to interpret it. My lawyer clapped my shoulder. "Go get your son," she said. That afternoon, I drove to the new house. Caleb had seen pictures, but he hadn't been there yet. He sat in the passenger seat, backpack at his feet, staring out the window. "Where are we going?" he asked. "You said we're not going to your apartment." "We're not," I said. "We're going home." He squinted at me. "To Mom's?" I shook my head. "Look," I said as we turned the corner onto our new street. The house came into view. White siding, dark shutters, a big oak tree in the yard. His eyes went wide. "You bought a house?" he whispered. "Yeah," I said, my throat tight. "We bought a house." Like a house?" he stammered. "With a yard? And stairs?" "Yep." "And I get a room?" he asked. "You get a room," I said. "A whole room. We can paint it any color you want. Except maybe radioactive green. I have limits." He laughed and practically bounced in his seat. When we parked, he jumped out before I'd even killed the engine. He ran up onto the porch, hand hovering over the door. "Can I?" he asked. "Go ahead," I said. He opened the door slowly, like something magical might be on the other side. His sneakers squeaked on the hardwood as he stepped in. The living room was still a little sparse. Couch, TV stand, some boxes with books, a rug, a couple of framed photos on the wall, him and me at the park, him covered in frosting at age 4, me and him wearing hard hats at one of my old sites. He did a slow spin. "This is ours?" he asked. "Ours," I nodded. He bolted up the stairs, checking every room. He found his, the one with the new twin bed, the desk by the window, the shelf waiting for his toys. His backpack dropped to the floor. "I get to live here?" he asked, breathless. "Half the time," I said, joining him. "Maybe more, if you count all the weekends we're going to steal." He flung himself at me, arms wrapping around my waist. "This is amazing," he said into my shirt. I hugged him back, blinking fast. "Hey," I said after a moment, pulling back a little. "Want to see something else?" "What?" he asked. I led him downstairs, then out the back door into the yard. The grass was patchy in places, but the space was big. There was a tree with branches strong enough to hold a swing, a corner where we could someday put a grill, or maybe, if I ever recovered from my last career, a small workshop. "This is where we're going to build stuff," I said. "Treehouse, maybe." "Can we build a fort?" he asked. "A fort, a base, a castle, whatever you want," I said. "We've got time." We stood there for a moment, the evening light stretching our shadows across the grass. "Dad?" he said. "Yeah, buddy?" "Are we rich now?" he asked, saying the word like it was heavy. I thought about it. "We have enough," I said. "More than enough. Enough that I don't have to worry about money every second. Enough that I can be here when you need me. Enough that your future is safe." He considered that. "Does Mom know?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "She knows." "Is she mad?" he asked. "Probably," I said honestly. He nodded like that made sense. "And she can't take it?" he pressed. "No," I replied. "She can't take this. This is ours. Yours and mine." He smiled slowly. "Cool," he said. We went back inside, ordered pizza, and ate it on the floor of the living room because the dining chairs hadn't been delivered yet. We watched a movie. He fell asleep halfway through, his head on my arm. I sat there, the glow of the TV flickering, listening to his steady breathing, and thought about the path that had led us here. About my grandfather scribbling his name on a deed in 1961, probably not imagining it would one day underpin a tech empire. About my father writing that note. If anything happens to me, this land goes to Mark, and tucking it away, trusting someone would find it. About the filing cabinet, rusting quietly in a basement that smelled like death, holding on to our legacy like a secret. About Tiffany, laughing in the hallway, telling me to enjoy poverty. About me, standing in that basement with water in my boots and a deed in my hands, realizing I wasn't starting from nothing after all. Later that night, after I'd carried Caleb up to his room and tucked him into his new bed, I stepped out onto the back porch. The sky above was clear, stars faint through the city glow. I thought about calling my parents to tell them, to say, "You were wrong about us. We had something all along." But then I realized it didn't matter whether they knew. What mattered was the boy sleeping upstairs. The future that had quietly, stubbornly insisted on being delivered to our doorstep. What mattered was that I had gone from being a man stripped of everything to a man standing on ground his family actually owned. Not metaphorically, literally. My ex-wife had told me to enjoy poverty. I'd walked through it, scrubbed its floors, breathed its mold. And in the middle of it, I'd found wealth that had nothing to do with shiny cars or glass staircases. Wealth in paper, wealth in land, wealth in the knowledge that my family had mattered, even when we thought we didn't. I didn't just get lucky. I got what my grandfather left me, what my father tried to protect, what a lazy system buried and forgot. I just happened to be the one willing to dig it out of the mud. Sometimes you lose everything you can see, so you'll finally look at what was waiting, hidden all along.